chicken were talking to each other about what their favorite breakfast was. And the hog said to the chicken, "You know, my favorite breakfast in the morning are those sweet corn cobs with potato skins and that gravy they put all around it. I mean, I just love that breakfast first thing in the morning." And the chicken thought for a moment and responded and told the hog, "You know what my favorite breakfast is? Eggs and ham." And Hog thought about that for a moment and said, "That's easy for you to say. For you, that's an offering. But for me, that's a sacrifice." And you know, over the past few weeks, we've been reflecting on that one word, haven't we? Sacrifice. And how it has been powerfully reflected for us and for many other people actually throughout the years in a little girl who grew up in Philadelphia and had a chance to go to Sunday school. I was very touched by that experience, as I've shared with you, and so moved that she wanted to make sure that any child that wanted to go to Sunday school would be able to. And so she saved her money as best she could. A couple years later, they found her dead body in one of the poor tenements that surrounded the church. In her little purse under her body, there was 57 cents with a note that read, "This is for the little church to make it bigger so that all the children could go to Sunday school." Well, the pastor was so moved when he read that note and saw the incredible sacrifice that this little girl had made, that he began to challenge the people of his church to make the little church bigger. One thing led to another. There was a real estate developer who read the story, was willing to sell them a parcel of land for thousands of dollars. And when he found out that the church couldn't afford it, he offered it to them for 57 cents. And it was just one story, one miracle after another about how God honored the gift of this little child. And we all know that the heart of this gift wasn't so much about the 57 cents. 57 cents then and 57 cents now really doesn't buy very much, does it? But it was the heart. It was the attitude of sacrifice and the great desire that she had that made all the difference of the world. And to this day, if you go to Temple Baptist Church in Philadelphia, there's not only a Sunday school room big enough for hundreds of kids, but also a university and a hospital adjoined to it as well. And so as you and I reflect on this reality over these past few weeks of God's invitation to us to consider the gift of this little girl and what it meant for so many different people, and how much God honors a heart that is willing to sacrifice, whatever that means for you and whatever that means for me. I invite you along with me to take a look at our gospel lesson today. A very short lesson, but also a lesson that speaks to us about the importance of sacrifice in terms of our giving. We read the story of Jesus kind of hanging out by the temple, and he watches a widow come by and put in basically what amounts to a penny. And again, a penny then, a penny in this little girl's day and age, a penny today isn't a lot of money. But Jesus wasn't looking at the amount of money. He was looking at her heart. And even though he didn't talk to the widow, even though he didn't have a big conversation with her, we know that Jesus, being the Son of God, was well aware of her situation, just like he is of ours as well. And he was able to say to his disciples, as much as other people have put into the treasury, and I don't think Jesus was not grateful for any gift that was given to his Father's kingdom, but he was making a very important point, that this widow put in more than anybody else had that day because it was all that she had to live on. Now, what's important, I think, for you and I to realize is that part of what I'm asking you and I to reflect on over these past few weeks is, what does it look like for you and me to give sacrificially? I began reflecting with you about our hearts. Week after was time. Week after that was talent. And today I am sharing with you about treasure. First of all, I want to say I'm grateful for any gift that you give to this church, whatever it is in terms of heart, time, talent, and treasure. And I want to acknowledge that your stewardship for you and for I begins with our relationship with the Lord. That's where it all starts. At the end of the day, that is who you and I will be before in terms of the stewardship of our lives, in every aspect of it. And so I just want to say that I'm grateful for each of you and your faithful stewardship before God in every dimension of your being. And yet the Lord has invited us over these past few weeks to consider the example of an incredible little child who gave sacrificially. And I would say to you today in our gospel lesson, the incredible example of a widow who also gave sacrificially as well in terms of her treasure. And so what does that look like for you and me? What does it look like for you and me to, if you will, sacrificially give 57 cents? You remember over the past few weeks, I've asked you to spend 57 minutes doing different things. And some people went over that, they told me. Some people were a little bit short of it, depending on what it was. But obviously, you know, as we talk about 57 cents today, we're talking about the idea of sacrifice and giving in a way that would be sacrificial to the Lord. And so as you and I think about that in terms of our treasure, I would simply ask you to consider, first of all, what you're giving to his kingdom. You know, what are you giving to the work of the Lord in this place and maybe in other places as well? And what would it look like for you as you prayerfully consider your giving to St. John's in particular, and your giving in general of your treasure to other places over the coming year? What would giving sacrificially look like to you? I can't answer that question. I don't want to answer that question. I believe that's a very precious question that Jesus is asking you and me to come before him with over the coming days and weeks. And part of that question is to realize that as you and I come to that answer, and as you and I begin to sincerely give in a way that's sacrificial, that God will honor that in a way like never before. What is obvious to you and me as we've reflected on the story of this little girl, and as we reflect on the story of this widow, that as you and I begin to move into an area of sacrificial giving, there is a way in which God uses that and a way in which it touches God's heart that is beyond our understanding. And it is a way in which God uses that gift that can powerfully touch the lives of so many people. Now let me share what I believe some of you are thinking right now. Some of you are thinking, Father Joe, I can't even believe you'd have the audacity to say something like this. I mean, you have no idea how tight things are for us right now, how many commitments we have for our money already, for this and for that, and how can you even bring up such a thing? Well, I'm simply sharing with you the gospel. I'm simply sharing with you the story of a little girl who heard the call of Jesus in her heart and responded the way that she did. I'm simply sharing with you a gospel lesson today from the book of Mark and a story that Jesus told that touched his heart about the sacrificial giving of a woman. And so that's how I can bring it up before you today, is because it's clear to us in the scriptures and in the example that we've been reflecting over on the past few weeks about God's call to us at this moment in our lives. What would it look like for you and me to begin to give sacrificially? I invite you along with me over this coming week to take some time, 57 minutes or less if you want, to take some time to really prayerfully consider and think about that. You know, I'm like a lot of you. It's so easy to simply dismiss what I've been sharing and say, you know what, we're just going to keep on giving what we've been giving. That's good enough, and that's what we're going to do. But to be honest with you, over the past couple of weeks, I've actually been thinking for myself, what would it look like to begin to give sacrificially? And just begin to really ask that question. Just begin to take the moment to consider the possibility of what that would look like in terms of our heart, our time, our talent, and our treasure. As I conclude the stewardship series at St. John's for this year, I have been greatly blessed by it, and I hope that you have as well. I pray that you will not forget the example of this little girl and her tremendous witness to us. I pray that you would not forget the example of this widow and her tremendous witness to us as well. I pray that you would not forget what you have taken time to do over the past few weeks with your 57 minutes or so in feeding the poor, in sharing the gift of yourself with other people, and in being willing to open up your heart even more deeply to our Lord and one another in love. May these past few weeks and this day be a deposit in every sense of the word, a powerful deposit in our relationship with Jesus, a powerful deposit in our life with one another, that you and I in this place might begin to enter into a spirit of sacrifice in some way, shape, or form, that we might be used by God like that little girl and this widow to not only touch the hearts of many, many people in ways we can't even begin to imagine, but to touch the heart